This week, I've got Spider-Man Far From Home, which picks up where Avengers Endgame left off. So if you did not see Avengers Endgame, which I'm actually kind of almost impressed at this point if you have not seen Avengers Endgame yet, then don't see Spider-Man Far From Home. Also, don't watch the trailers for Spider-Man Far From Home because it totally gives so much of it away, which I find kind of upsetting since the trailers came out pretty soon after Endgame. Anyway, we are picking up where it left off. There's actually a really kind of fun in-theme device for explaining what's been going on in the world, what the fallout has been, how people have been dealing with it. And we're going to follow Peter Parker / Tom Holland / Spider-Man on a school trip to Europe. And he just wants to be a teenager, which makes sense because at this point, he's actually, 16? He's a younger Spider-Man that we've had in previous ones. Samuel L. Jackson's back, Zendaya, Cobie Smulders, Jacob Batalon, Martin Starr, Marisa Tomei, Jon Favreau are all back. And then we've got the new player entering the game is Jake Gyllenhaal, who's playing Mysterio. And if you're a fan of the Spider-Man comics, you're going to go, ooh, Mysterio. And if you're not, you're going to go, ooh, man in a bubble head. Bubble boy? We're bringing it back. We're bringing it back, Jake Gyllenhaal. So I like the Spider-Man movies a lot. I mean, who doesn't like the Spider-Man movies? They're fun. I think they're lighter. I did like that I think we've had too many of them, but I think Tom Holland makes a great Spider-Man. There's a sense of humor about these movies. Some of the other Marvel movies get a little overwhelming in terms of team-ups and all this stuff, so it's kind of nice to have one character's arc, and he does have an arc that, is relatable in that he just wants to be a kid. We all wanted to be a normal, cool kid and hang out with not even cool kid. We just wanted to be a normal kid, hang out with our friends, and just kind of fit in, right? Everyone wants to fit in, and obviously Peter Parker / Spider-Man is in a position where it's tough for him to do so because he's constantly running off to save the world. The film takes place in Europe. There's a lot of beautiful sights. I like the way that they handled Mysterio. It's certainly slightly different than the comics, but I think it makes sense in terms of adapting it. The Mysterio comic plotline originally is that he is a failed actor who is a special effects artist and a stuntman, which, those are tough professions to be in. You have to be an expert in something, so it shouldn't, be knocking him that he goes into this. Anyway, so they changed things up for Spider-Man Far From Home, but I think it makes sense for, kind of the on-screen movie visual medium. Jake Gyllenhaal is fine. He's very theatrical. He's an actor in this, which totally fits the character. My big complaint about almost every Marvel movie, in fact, I'm going to say pretty much, Marvel movies have issues with villains, and Marvel movies, especially of late, have been doing these super, what I call disposable fights, where, sure, it's a complicated, choreographed, epic fight, but you're fighting like robots, or you're fighting drones, or you're fighting disposable alien, faceless whoever's, and I don't care, because I know that, you're gonna kill the cajillions of robots. The stakes are not even in that, yes, you are overwhelmed, but why do I care, right? I kind of want Civil War in that, I want there to be stakes. I want to feel invested in either side losing. And in this, it's whoa, no, of course I'm not going to be invested if a bunch of, faceless whatever gets destroyed. Who cares? That's my big complaint, and I would love for them to solve this. I don't know, DC just in general probably has better one-to-one villains. Spider-Man, ironically, has some of the best villains, so it is kind of tough that if Spider-Man can have them, right, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where else are we supposed to turn for this? That's my big kind of challenge with it. There are some very good fan service moments in this movie. Almost a little over the top. Again, I think all the acting is great. There's some fun, high school dynamic, blah, blah, blah stuff, which it's light. And it's light in a grounded way versus a Guardians of the Galaxy or a Thor Ragnarok, where it's these are kind of relatable humans for the most part because it's a bunch of teenage kids. So I very much enjoyed it. I think it's a good, fun summer film. I am so ready for a break from superhero films, though. So ready. Give me a pause here. Give me a pause. There are 2 after-credit scenes. You absolutely should stay through both of them. Ironically, I've been thinking constantly about the after-credit scenes more than I've thought about the course of the movie since I've seen it, and I feel like that's not the greatest sign, but definitely please stay for the next few ones. It's also obviously going to set up, whatever next Spider-Man there is. Also, my God, just Tom Holland is in his early 20s now, but is he going to look like this? I feel like he's either going to look like this forever or some unfortunate rapid aging thing is going to happen when he hits 25, and it's just going to be an unfortunate effect of, young actor turned yikes, which happens. It happens all the time. But anyway, Spider-Man Far From Home. I still think Homecoming is better. I'm going to point that out. I think Homecoming was just slightly more wrapped up. This is a little more zany adventure. And also this one requires you very much to have seen other Marvel movies. I thought that Homecoming, generally speaking, like, sure, it just kind of goes into, it just dives right in, but overall, I think it was less dependent on the rest of the cinematic universe. This one, you absolutely have to have seen other stuff. So Spider-Man, Far From Home, still going to give it 4.3 out of 5. My other film this week is in a very different tone, and it is Midsommar, which is a horror film from Ari Aster, who did Hereditary, which I was absolutely too chicken to see in theaters. I talk a lot about not being a horror fan, but every once in a while something blips on my radar that I just kind of feel obligated to see. And Midsommar, I was like, based on the trailers, I was like, I think I can handle this. Yeah, I can't decide if I was right or wrong. It very much reminds me of The Wicker Man. In fact, it's pretty much The Wicker Man. Sorry, spoilers if you've seen The Wicker Man. It's tough to reinvent the horror genre. I think Hereditary was probably a slightly more unique take on this. But what I will say about Midsommar is it is beautifully filmed. Like, it's gorgeous. It's funny because we just had actual Midsommar, and I'd seen this movie right before, and seeing all these people posting like, oh, here's me in a flower garland. It's late all the time, blah, blah. And I was just like, don't die. So the plot is there's a young woman named Dani who's played by Florence Pugh, who I think is great. She was in Fighting With My Family with The Rock, and I thought she's relatable. They're in the hands of someone less talented. This movie would have just been like slash horror porn, basically. And I thought she was good as she's kind of our guide through this bizarro experience. And she and her boyfriend, Christian, played by Jack Reynor, and some other friends who are played by William Jackson Harper from The Good Place, and Will Poulter go with their Swedish friend, who's the actor's name I cannot pronounce if my life depended on it, to this, his little kind of Swedish commune village to celebrate Midsommar. Now, horrible things have happened to Dani prior to this trip. It all happens in the first few minutes, so not spoiling too much, but she's not in a great place, so probably shouldn't be going on this vacation. And then weirdness ensues, as per the formula of every horror movie. You get there, something's not right. I don't know if horror is actually the right way to describe this film. There's certainly quasi-supernatural elements, there are quasi-whatever, but like it was more like super suspense than horror, if that makes sense. To me, horror is like Freddy Krueger and like things popping out at you and murdering you and like drippy, gross, whatever. This is more like tense, slightly weird tension. The main takeaway from it for me is no new friends, which is one of my favorite life philosophies. I think if you are a fan of Ari Aster already, if you loved Hereditary, I think this is going to be slightly different for you, but that you are going to enjoy it. It's a slightly bizarre movie to release in the middle of summer. I understand why, because it is Midsommar, but it's certainly different than the other stuff you tend to get. It's certainly not a Marvel Spider-Man Far From Home-esque epic. It's not like a blockbuster per se, so it might be palate cleansing in that sense. I think it is getting overhyped, honestly. And I think there's a certain subset of people who absolutely love these types of movies, and good on them. I think it's a good movie, but don't go into it being like, this is as good as Hereditary, because I think Hereditary is probably better, honestly. It's a good sophomore film to come out in theaters and be, a big splash. Or the thing for me is that it kind of builds all this tension and it falls apart in the end. Like, it doesn't deliver for me. So in that sense, I'm like, it's fine, but it's also not revolutionary. And, I think the performances and the kind of cinematography and the setting and all that stuff really help elevate it. But if you just look at plot and character development, it's not like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So Midsommar, I because I am not a super horror fan, like if you're like me, you might be able to tolerate it, but I don't know if you're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm so happy I saw this film. If you are a horror or suspense fan, I think it's a good film to go see. Why not? But I'm gonna give it 3.6 out of 5.